Hey everybody, welcome to the Recoup. I'm Cooper Daniels and I'm a guy that knows a little about a lot. And today I have a great one. I'm talking to John Woods. He is the new CTO of the Algorand Foundation. And I'm excited to have you on. Thanks for coming on, John.
Pleasure.
Yeah. So how are you doing? First off, how are you doing?
Well, it's been an intense 3 weeks, Coop. I've been at the foundation for the last few weeks, and I've been learning so much.
Yeah.
I guess it's one of those things you think when you're working in computer engineering or you're working in the blockchain space for a number of years, I guess you could become complacent. You kind of think, hey, you know, I kind of have this, I've got a handle on this whole thing. And I guess moving into Algorand, I realized, well, the tech here runs deep. So there's been so much to learn. I guess I've been leveraging the folks at the foundation, trying to get as much information as possible, but also the guys at the Inc. have been super helpful as well. So I've got access, thankfully, to all of the brightest minds over there, and they're doing their best to educate me. So it's been going great, but a lot to learn. I feel like I'm jacked into the matrix.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, there's some guys over at Inc. like Chris Pikert and obviously Silvio McCauley. There's some pretty talented people over there, aren't there?
Absolutely. And I won't start naming names because some of them have been so helpful, and I'll end up like not calling one out, and then they'll hate me forever. But yeah, actually, you know, Chris is great. I was watching a video on YouTube earlier about Chris. Not about Chris, about state proofs, and it was presented by Chris. And it was just great. And I think actually he reminds me of what I try to model myself after, which is a person who's able to explain complex topics in simple language. I think it's really important. And that video that Chris did was great because it's like, here's state proofs. Okay, this is a complex thing. It's got zero knowledge proofs. It's got like exotic cryptography. It's got, you know, I guess cutting edge engineering, but he explains it in a way that's accessible. And I think that's something that's really important to do.
So, okay. So I know that there's a lot of people out there in the Algorand community that are excited to get to know you and maybe know a little bit more about your past. So why don't we just start there? How did you, you know, where are you coming from? How did you get the blockchain technology and cryptography in general?
Yes, it's an interesting question, I guess. Hopefully it's interesting to listen to the answer. One of my buddies, his name is Dylan. Big shout out. He'd be very impressed given the size of your audience that he's just got a call out right there.
What's up, Dylan? Yeah,
exactly. He came around to my flat. Flat is like an apartment, I think, maybe in American. When I was like, it was like back in maybe 2012-ish, maybe late 2012, early 2013. And he was like, I've got to show you this thing called Bitcoin. Now, he and I studied the same computer engineering in university or college. And so we were in the same course together, and so we had similar interests, and we were both geeks about certain things. We both liked Apple stuff, and we both liked kind of, you know, whatever was cool at the time, like MP3s or something like back in the 80s or whatever the hell it was. But he basically came over and he was like, hey, check this out. Like, and, you know, to be quite honest with you, when he first showed it to me, I didn't get the value proposition. He fired up a Bitcoin node, which at the time didn't actually take very long to sync because it was relatively new. And he bought BTC from eBay. Can you imagine doing that now? Like someone was like 50 BTC on eBay and like he bought it for like, I don't know, like 100 euros, which is like, I don't know. At this point, actually, it's $100. But it used to be like about $120, $130. And like, so he sent me 2 Bitcoins that night just to show me that he could move value from his laptop to my desktop computer in my apartment. And by the way, I've since lost that 120 grand at its peak. And
good
also,
job.
Good job.
Did you lose? You lost it because it was on a hard drive somewhere, or
it was on a hard drive. Did the whole kind of hey mom and dad, where's my hard drive? So, you know, I tried to recover it, didn't get it, but at the time it was only worth like 12 euros or something, or $12. Yeah, and I mean, that was the first time I was introduced to it. But anyway, I guess what I wanted to kind of highlight was I didn't recognize in that moment the value of this self-sovereignty, this idea that you own your money, not the bank. And I can tell you, I've experienced that tonight. I was trying to pay my credit card bill and I paid it. And then my bank's limit for today wouldn't allow me to send my wife as much money as I actually wanted to send her today so she can do something else. So that doesn't feel to me very much like it's my money. It feels like it's my money, but I'm stemmed a little bank account or a little kind of allowance, I should say. And that's not very self-sovereign. So I didn't immediately understand the self-sovereign value of Bitcoin. And the other things, which I guess, again, take a little bit further, a little bit more insight, a little bit longer to kind of recognize the value of, are things like censorship resistance. The idea that it's not one government out there that can say, hey, you can spend your money in these places, but you can't send it to this sanctioned country over here for whatever reason we deem is viable in our particular country or domicile. I didn't get the value of permissionlessness, which is, I don't know if permissionlessness is a word, but I quite like the idea that you don't have to qualify to have a Bitcoin account. And I'm using Bitcoin as an example here. Obviously, Algorand is where my heart is, but it started it all. So let's use it as an example.
Of course. I
quite like the idea that it's permissionless in the sense that I remember when I emigrated from my home country of Ireland to the UK, to London. Not a big move, but I remember how difficult it was to acquire a bank account, which is of course required modernly in a modern living to kind of sustain yourself. And it requires proof of address. It requires utility bills and other things like that. And of course, I understand why. I've worked in central banking. I understand you need to have some control on money and stuff like that. But it's ultimately it excludes certain people who don't qualify. And sometimes folks don't have the money for a house and don't have utility bills because they can't afford certain things. And ultimately, that's not very cool. And then finally, there's the property of censorship resistance, which I think is very important. And this is just broadly, I categorize it as the idea that I can spend my money on what I want to spend it on. And maybe I'm in a country that doesn't allow a certain religion or a certain behavior. And I appreciate we all have to follow laws and stuff, but there's a nicety in being able to spend your money on something that is valuable to you. So these are kind of like, I guess, quite abstract properties of cryptocurrencies, but they're things that I value. And it's when I realized these, when they dawned on me, and it took more than that night when I was learning about Bitcoin first and having a couple of beers. It took more than that night for me to figure this stuff out. But when I did, they're the characteristics that made me want to work in this space. And they're the things that I think are going to change the face of finance in the internet or internet communication age.
Absolutely. I had obviously I had a similar journey where I was a bit of not that I was a gold bug, but when I thought of like how to hedge and stuff like that, I thought gold was the right thing. And I was always kind of like, well, Bitcoin, what is it backed by? Right. That was my kind of, why is there ever going to be value was where I started as well. And it was what you just broke down so great that it was also what got me going and got me to, do what I'm doing. So absolutely. So you mentioned it. You worked at the Central Bank of Ireland for a bit of a time, right?
Yeah, it was a great experience. It's a wonderful institution, and it's a wonderful institution. But it was certainly a nice place to work.
Beautiful building, I'm sure. I'm just kidding. Beautiful building.
My buddy Dylan, the same guy who introduced me to Bitcoin, used to call it the House of Fiat. So the thing is, I learned a lot there. I was a solution architect there, and what that broadly means in my career of like engineering, computer science, is that you're kind of designing systems. And so I learned a lot about how the euro system works, and the euro system, very much like the dollar system run by the Fed, and I guess the Federal Reserve Bank is the kind of governing body of in the US, right? And the SEC for exchange stuff. Regulation, yeah. So kind of the Central Bank of Ireland is kind of the equivalent of the Fed and the SEC kind of wrapped into one, more or less. It's like, consumer protection, regulation, and that kind of stuff. And so I learned a ton there. It was amazing to be what is the word? To experience or to, I don't know the word. To spend some time in that environment where you can kind of see how things are run, because it's non-trivial to kind of run a national currency, and so it was great. I think as well, during my time there, I spent a little bit of time ensconced at the ECB, the European Central Bank, where they were running some kind of proof of concept programs on developing a euro coin, right? And I think this is an interesting thing. So I learned a ton of stuff there. It was great.
Absolutely. Yeah. The euro coin, which other people, will know as a central bank digital currency, a CBDC, correct? So you worked on that. And, Algorand, there was just a paper recently done on Algorand and CBDCs. And obviously, I'm not having you on as the CTO of the Algorand Foundation to make some announcement of, a new CBDC using Algorand. But when that conversation comes up, Algorand is often one of the chains that people propose as the basis for maybe a CBDC. What are your thoughts? I've also noticed looking into your privacy is something that you've worked on a lot. And so what are your thoughts about, like, some people say, well, why would we even need a CBDC? We just need stable coins, USDC and all of that. What are your thoughts on the importance of CBDCs and some of the strengths and some of the potential pitfalls of CBDCs?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's a very interesting question. And I guess I want to be careful how I answer it. And I think it's important to be authentic in answers. So I would say the following, and okay. semi diplomatic answer.
Okay.
I think it's very important that someone can work, earn some value, whatever currency it's in, go to a store or a shop in Europe and be able to procure goods and services at a reasonably stable way.
Right.
And so it's very important that a person, can lay a tile one day and buy the same, vegetable or good the next day in a kind of a non-volatile way. And if we had the kind of extreme volatility that we see sometimes in cryptocurrencies at the moment, by the way, because they're not efficient markets, and when they become efficient, I don't think we will see that anymore. And when their market capitalization grows to a point of trillions of dollars, the way it has in the other mature markets, I think this will evaporate. But if we saw those kind of current volatilities in national currencies, it wouldn't be a very nice experience as a consumer. And so you got to remember as well, not every consumer is able to, I guess, look after themselves as well as others. We have people who are older, people who are maybe not as capable of looking after themselves. So I think it's really important that they are able to plan ahead. And so national currencies and fiat currencies, the euro, the dollar, etc., they allow that level of stability, and I think it's really important. So I don't think they're going anywhere, and nor really do I think they need to go anywhere. I think that the cryptocurrencies that we have now, and I'll get onto that in a second, are going to be a complement to the existing national currencies.
Right.
About a CBDC directly, I think that CBDCs are important because I guess it's the natural evolution of money. So like, we started with things like salt, and then you mentioned like gold, and this idea of coins. And then of course you've got like, as Andreas Antonopoulos, I think he said something like it, then it matured to like, dollar bills, and then it goes to plastic money. And now we're in an age where we have digital money, both in the euro and the dollar. And indeed we have internet native money in things like Bitcoin, Algorand, etc.
Yeah.
And I think the issuance of central bank, fiat or central bank backed money, which and the right of issuance of issuing such a currency is called the act of seigniorage. This idea that you can actually issue money. It's something that will benefit from the digital age. It'll benefit from being a central, a CBDC, but there are drawbacks. So the benefits are, well, we don't have to worry about minting coins, and we don't have to worry about distribution of notes anymore. And we don't have to worry about replacing notes, which, by the way, is very expensive to kind of create these things, ship them out to the economy, to the banks, to the people, to destroy the ones that are either counterfeit or are, for example, the notes are just too old and they're torn and they're no longer useful. This whole process actually involves hundreds of thousands of people nationally across countries, and it costs millions, tens of millions of dollars to do on an annual basis. And that's not free. There's carbon there. There's energy used in that process. So CBDCs actually have a lot of value in the sense that and they're going to eliminate some of those things, or all of them which mentioned there. But where I'm nervous about CBDCs is that they will give greater insight and control of governments upon how people interact with money. Now, I don't want to sound like a tinfoil hat person, but ultimately, I think it's broadly understood that the control of the money supply is ultimately somewhat control of the people. If you can control inflation, you control how people spend. If you can control things like quantitative easing, you control again how people behave to some degree, not on a day-to-day action basis, but macroscopically.
Yeah.
So when CBDCs actually become mainstream, expect the following. Folks will have, I feel, less control on their spending habits because it will be easier to enact these changes in monetary supply. Folks will have less privacy because with a digital version of the euro or the dollar or any other currency, visibility into what folks are doing, what people are spending their money on, will be much easier to do. Regulation and oversight is much easier. I mean, right now I can take a €50 note or a $50 bill. I can head down to the store. I can buy $50 worth of sugar or $50 worth of alcohol. And whether that's good or bad for me is, I guess, is up to the viewer. But at the end of the day, there's something I think important in that ability to make that decision with the money that you earn. And so I can see a world where, for example, with CBDCs, people pay more for their health insurance because they drink too much alcohol, and that's known because of the lack of privacy. Maybe that's a good thing. I mean, maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. I'm not really judging it, but these are potential implications of such a
I didn't it hadn't actually occurred to me exactly. Like if I have a track record of, going to the liquor store every night, and then if a healthcare, if an insurance company can track that, they may think I'm a liability. That is something. And then there's also the idea that if you live in a country where they have things like social credit, and they can turn the money off, and or whatever that you can't buy, you can't purchase, or they make cash illegal. So it's a dicey subject that I'm constantly trying to kind of evolve and learn more about. But
so I think that last point you made is a really, really interesting one. It's like if I have a programmable dollar, like if I can put logic into my dollar or logic into my euro, then I can say, well, hey, this is like a rebate from the government for some reason. This is, I don't know what you call it in the US, but say, I clearly don't know what they call it here either. This is a social security payment or something like that. Some money you get as a benefit from the government for some reason. Right. You're unemployed or you can't work or something.
Yeah, some benefit.
But let's say you can't work. Maybe the government issues you $20 of CBDC. But maybe your $20 comes with the restriction that when you try to tap your phone or your issued government card in Costco, it doesn't allow you to buy certain goods because the government says, well, I'm comfortable with everything, but I'm not letting you buy a packet of Rolos or Hershey's or whatever. These are, I guess, they're ethical questions, they're social questions. I don't know if they've been answered, and maybe the first iteration of a CBDC won't have any of these restrictions, and it sounds like I'm a bit tinfoil hat at the moment. But you got to remember, this is really where it's going. And I think we have to be aware of that. And that brings me to my final point, which is this is why I'm so fascinated and also excited by the cryptocurrency space in general, because I believe in the value of these things, the self-sovereign, the censorship resistance, etc. I believe in the value of these things as a complement to and a hedge for government-issued currencies. I really do.
Absolutely. And okay, we're going to move on. We don't need to have this entire interview be about CBDCs, but I mean, I think there's a lot of people out there that would look at something like a welfare payment and having limitations on what you can use that welfare payment for as a positive thing, right? I mean, but okay. So moving on.
And by the way, that's totally true. It is totally true. But again, we have to recognize we're in uncharted territory in that context.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And we always have to be careful because once you do one thing, it can lead to the next thing. And then okay, sure, you like the fact that somebody's limited on what they can purchase with welfare, but will you be happy when your paycheck comes in and you're limited because you checked yourself into a rehab once and you're like, or something like that?
Exactly.
Oh man, what a mess. I mean, it's exciting. Everything is exciting, and technology and progress is exciting. And then it's also, concerning sometimes. Right?
Yes.
Okay. So, but let's talk about some of your past also, that it's probably more has to do with what you're doing over there at Algorand. Like, you were at Consensus for a while, and I know, Stacy, I've been to a couple of these conventions, and I've listened to her speak, and even I think your announcement of coming to Algorand is very excited about the different developer tools and what we can bring to Algorand to help developers. And obviously Consensus is the premier place, MetaMask and Truffle and things like that coming from Consensus. So why don't you talk a little bit about your time at Consensus and how that experience is going to help, you think, Algorand?
Sure, absolutely. It's an interesting question. So I worked in Consensus within Europe, and I worked in the professional services arm. So this is like where Consensus would do, I guess, bespoke engagements with various companies. So maybe Shell or Deutsche Bank or Citibank or a bunch of different firms would want to do a project on blockchain because they're compelled by the benefits that it brings.
Yeah.
So within Consensus, they had various, I guess, circles, and MetaMask was one of them, and they were focused on the wallets, and there's many other examples of different kind of sub-projects that they had. But I was really my role there was leading out architecture and applied cryptography. So I used to work on both of those things. So building out how we would do things architecturally, software-wise, with our bespoke engagements, and also working on what are the primitives, the cryptographic primitives we're going to be using to build out this solution in the most elegant way. So professional services was really, I guess, where Consensus made its money. Maybe not anymore because MetaMask and other things that are so successful. But Consensus was great for me. It was a huge learning curve. It was my first time working, professionally, as in being directly paid for it in crypto. Right. And I learned an absolute ton. It was an amazing experience. I think I got to work on some of their biggest client engagements. I guess we built. There's one called Covantis, which is coming out now, and I was the lead architect on that, and I led out the entire development of the kind of the system architecture and design, and that was about revolutionizing how post-trade settlement will be done in an agricultural trade context. So that's a lot of words probably, but what it means is there's bananas grown on a tree and bananas sold in the store. It's like, how do we? You wouldn't believe, by the way, Coop, the number of steps between bananas in the tree and bananas in the store. There's like guys who buy and sell them by the megaton on a ship. If the ship arrives late, there's a penalty. If the ship's too wide in the port, if the sun's too high in the sky, there's another penalty. There's, were they fumigated? Were they not? Was the farmer aware of something? Were they not? What breed of banana are they? So the agricultural trading world is incredibly sophisticated, and it turns out the operational work you've got to do in terms of, I guess, netting out the positions of all these trades and interactions from the tree all the way to the store is really consuming in terms of computational cycles and indeed work hours. So
right.
One of Consensus's big wins was building out a product called Covantis, which was an agricultural trading and settlement solution, which would basically use the blockchain to build a layer of trust from the farmer all the way to the store. And everyone got settled fairly all along the way, and everyone had transparency where it was appropriate. So there's some privacy, but only where it was appropriate. And so that was one of the kind of types of things I got to build there. And I guess it was all on Ethereum because Consensus, I'm not sure now, but I think it still is very much focused on Ethereum.
Right.
And I guess when you're engaged in an enterprise level solution of that magnitude, where you're dealing with big industry players that are heavily invested in this kind of technology, and you're carte blanche on the solution, so you can design whatever you wish. And I'm surrounded by really smart people. I mean, it's a great environment because you're using blockchain in a kind of a greenfield way. Okay, guys, we have this problem. How do we make it better using blockchain? You go into a room, you eat some pizza, drink some beer, and you come out with a great solution. It wasn't always fun. It wasn't It wasn't always as fun as that. There was some late night work where there was no beer, but
yeah,
it was
lots of coffee, I'm sure. Yeah. So, experience. And I can imagine with that specific solution that you're talking about, it's probably a huge advantage to a farmer, right? Like, it seems like to me that the farmer is the guy that often gets really kind of beat up by a lot of these different steps and middlemen and all of this stuff. So in the end, I mean, because I know that Algorand has recently partnered with Nigeria, and I'm sure that these types of solutions are being built and worked on for farmers in Nigeria, for example. Is that something that...
So I haven't got direct exposure at the moment to the kind of things we're doing in terms of professional services on Algorand, but I do agree with you. I think that, I mean, there's a whole bunch of reasons why I came to Algorand. But one of them is the sustainable green nature of the blockchain, how it's like fundamentally sustainable, because the cost of execution, the cost of running is so low, and the speed at which transactions happen and the liveness with which applications can enjoy execution is so great that you can actually use it to be fit for purpose for something like a national engagement, as you might have with a country like Nigeria, Ghana, or otherwise. So it's a very exciting prospect. And what else did I want to say? I just think that, like, although I don't have insight right now into exactly how things are going to look, I just think it's really important that we use these kind of technologies to empower as many people as possible. Now, I'm not trying to be a bleeding heart about egalitarianism. I'm not trying to be like, oh, the world must be completely equal for everyone, because I don't think that is really economically viable or really practical. I mean, you're always going to have people who are at different ends of the spectrum. You're always going to have billionaires, and you're always going to have people who, unfortunately, don't have a place to stay or don't have enough to eat. I don't think that we're going to resolve that until we have like Star Trek Enterprise kind of technology. But what I would say is that I think, just like the internet has done, as an example with communication. So, like, I remember as a kid, my uncle traveled to the United States. He lived in New York, back in the late 80s. And I remember, like, my parents trying to call him, and it was like this big deal to call the uncle in the United States. And it was like, he sounded far away on the telephone. And, like, there was a delay, a noticeable delay when I'd say hello, you'd be waiting. Hi, this kind of thing. And I guess the internet has emancipated a lot of people from that. And by the way, that call was really expensive. It was like, $2 a minute, $3 a minute, this kind of, or whatever it was at the time. And so now we can do basically global communication for free, global text messaging for free, global calls for free. And the internet's it's leveled the playing field. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, I think blockchain has that same power from a financial and in some ways, I guess, operational perspective. It can level the playing field. It can make things a little bit easier and spread things a little bit more kind of fairly across folks. So I think that's what we should be focused on. It's like, how can we use the tech to deliver egalitarian value to people at a large scale? That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you mentioned it, the reasons why you came to Algorand, and I'm sure that we're about a half hour in, and people are like, okay, are you going to mention Cardano, Cooper? Like, what's going on? But so you recently just came over from what is it? Input Output, the basically the foundation over there at Cardano, right? That's what that is.
Yeah. Input Output HK, or sorry, Input Output Hong Kong. Or sometimes known as IOG or Input Output Global, is the Algorand Inc. effectively.
Oh, it's the Inc. Right, that's right. And so exactly. So, and there's two things. There's one thing that is very similar between Algorand and Cardano, is basically banking the unbanked. And I feel like you were touching on that a bit too. So there is a lot of similar values. I mean, so look, I'm going to read the tweet that Charles Hoskinson tweeted when you got over at ALGO. It was a really generous tweet from Charles. He said, "I'm delighted to see John step up as the CTO, and it opens up many great opportunities for future collaboration and research. I think that's interesting. We should talk about that. And then Algorand is an excellent project with exceptional people." I agree with Charles, and I'm excited. I'm excited that you're here as well. So maybe talk a little bit about your experience at Cardano, and then how that kind of concluded and how you ended up over at Algorand to start.
Sure. Good question. A minefield. A minefield.
I tried to like, simple, right? That's all I wanted to know. Yeah. All the different things. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Okay. So I left Consensus because I didn't feel like I was doing any more interesting enough things. And I didn't feel anymore that I was valued in the way that I thought was appropriate. And that's the honest truth of it. And so I spent some time at Informatica, which was kind of, TradFi company. Actually, they aren't even in finance. They're in big data. And it was a very cool place to work. And I really enjoyed my time there. Mm-hmm. And when I was there, I focused on cryptographic engineering and cloud security. So it was kind of something I was personally interested in. And it was something that naturally fit my background in terms of cryptography and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Actually, you did ask earlier on how I got interested in cryptography, and I didn't answer it, but maybe we can do that later.
Okay.
So then, I moved into IOHK from there because I got a bite at an apple that I felt was really interesting. IOHK had tried to hire me. I think I can say this. About a year before, or a year and a half before, I actually joined them, and I didn't feel that the role at the time was what I wanted to do. And then, but I built a relationship there during that process, and so I still had the guys' numbers in my phone and stuff. So when they came back to me and they said, "Hey, there's this kind of opportunity, right, to be, the chief architect or director of architecture on Cardano," I mean, that was a role I was interested in. So I joined, and it was great. I think that they have like some of the greatest engineers. And yes, like in Algorand, there's no doubt, from Silvio to Tal to the guys that I work with now. I've mentioned names now. I got to like mention everyone's names, like Fabrice and Hugo and Shai and the guys at the Inc. and Paul and John and Gary and everyone at the Inc. and Chris, and there's so many of them. These people are world class. Like, they're world class. They're the Messi, the Ronaldo, they're the Tiger Woods. They're world class. They honestly are world class people. And when you're when you're working with them, you're like learning every day. It's like the greatest thing. So I felt like that when I went to Cardano, because, the guys over there, they're world class. And so that was amazing. And it was like being like it is now, being jacked into the matrix, like this I sound like such maybe an 80s or 90s kid, but I love the matrix. When they jack the needle thing in, you're just like getting downloaded all the information. And they were really kind with me. I felt like the engineering guys over there, I'm not going to start naming names because I'll leave someone out, but they spent so much time answering all my stupid questions, and I came up the curve really fast, and it was great. What can I say? I think I really like the way they approach software design. I think the formal methods approach is quite cool. This idea that you try to verify your software mathematically, it's quite a colloquial description, but that's kind of how it is. I really like their attention to detail in terms of benchmarking and how they're going to release things. They make sure they test everything to the nth degree. They make sure it performs perfectly before they release it. And I mean, their engineering, benchmarking, cryptography teams are just stellar. So it was a wonderful experience. Now, where do I go from there? I felt valued there, and I felt like I was a very important part of the team. Things were really good. And then I was approached for CTO at Algorand. And of course, I knew Algorand because at Cardano, we use the cryptography code, the VRF, the verifiable random function, which is, by the way, it's a really nice cryptographic primitive. And maybe sometime you and I could do a show where I walk through some of the techie stuff, and it'd be quite cool. So I won't go into it right
please.
now.
I would love to.
Yeah, tell me.
Well, and I was going to say, sorry to interrupt, but I know that there's people interested in like maybe learning how to run a participation node, and some of that. Sure. If you were willing to come on and go through some of this technical stuff, I'm absolutely willing to. I want to learn and everything as well. So, and I know my audience does too. Yeah, absolutely.
I would love to, and we can even go into some of the math or even the cryptographic stuff, because it's actually not that hard.
Cool.
But it's certainly hard to come up with it, but it's not that hard to explain.
Right.
So. I knew about Algorand because we use the VRF, the verifiable random function, and we use this within Algorand to select the next kind of block creator. And similarly in Cardano, they use it to select the next, what is it called? My God, I've only been gone a couple of weeks. I've totally forgotten.
Well, you're learning a new thing here, right?
Yeah. The SPOs, rather. The SPOs, the stake pool operators use it to select, it's used to select which SPO is going to create the next block.
Yeah.
And so I knew Algorand was legit, right? Because projects are using their code. They're using their inventions. So I was like, this must be something special. So I looked into Algorand, rather, and, man, that is a rabbit hole that runs deep. The AVM is really great. I think that the architecture is beautiful. Pure proof of stake as a consensus mechanism is so elegant. And whilst we have some work to do in terms of decentralization of the relay nodes, they are decentralized, but I want them not just technically decentralized, I want them spiritually decentralized, where genuinely anyone can run one. Like, it is, the tech within Algorand is so compelling. I felt like it was fit for purpose for a rollout of decentralized apps at a global level where no one would wait. And so I needed to be part of that story. I needed to be part of bringing that. Now, I'm not trying to take any credit for all the work that's been done to get Algorand to where it impressed me, because I was impressed because all of this work had been done by actual engineers to the point where I was impressed. And since I've joined, people have been doing the really hard work since I've joined. So it won't be me who will have brought this miracle to the world, but I want to be part of that story. And so that was the most compelling reason I left. Of course, it was exciting to be CTO, to step up to that level, as Charles alluded. Of course, it was sad to leave behind, nearly a year of hard work, of hard learning. I mean, I killed myself trying to learn that Cardano stack. It's very sophisticated also. I put my heart and soul into it for 9 or 10 months. I just built relationships with all the guys and girls at the company. I'd planned things with them. I had committed to things. So of course, whenever you move from something like that, you are not only, I feel like you're letting people down, but also you're making a big life change.
Yeah.
So it was a tough decision, with all of the factors considered. But when I looked at just the value proposition of Algorand and the value I could hopefully bring, I just had to take it.
I hope that I've. No, that you answered it, and I think the answer is that there's no scandal here, right? You loved it over there, and were excited about the possibilities of Algorand and this new position. And there was another part of that tweet that I read about future collaboration and research. He seems, because Charles isn't shy about saying his admiration for Silvio and that he thinks that Algorand's a good project, and that's sure. That's cool. And but I guess you as a CTO at the foundation, that's a good connection to have. What I mean, maybe not that I'm saying that you guys have anything going or anything that if you have something you can't talk about, whatever, but what kind of collaboration do you see that could be possible between Algorand and Cardano?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I think both of these blockchains are both credible. They're both authentic and credible and have real technology with real people who are really smart. So that's the checkbox number one.
Yeah, for sure.
Number two, I think it's really important to try to, I don't want to say migrate or pull, but like to attract actually as many developers from Ethereum and the other chains that I feel maybe aren't as fit for purpose over to blockchains like Algorand.
Right.
So I have spoken very briefly to Charles on a single call, and I've spoken to the other senior executives at Cardano before I left around the concept of collaboration. And there are certain areas where I think that there's immediate value. I mean, so I'm not speaking for these guys or these girls. I'm just speaking for myself. But where I would see immediate value, and by the way, I think that they largely would have interest in it, and I think they're largely interested in well, I know that they're interested in progressing the space, not just themselves. So where I would see immediate value is in blockchain interoperability. And look, there's a ton of things happening from Wormhole to, you know, there's so many different chains out there. I won't even bother mentioning them. But Chainlink, there's a whole bunch of them that are trying to do this. But I really like the idea of doing something as a standard in terms of interoperability. So something like state proofs, which are very sexy. Not everyone call that sexy, but a sexy.
My audience, I think my audience does. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And very, very elegant, I guess, way to photograph the essence of a chain and prove it to another chain. And again, that's something that we should deep dive into because it's a really super interesting area.
Right.
And so this makes building bridges really easy, right? Because if you can say, hey, man, you can trust this. This is like a tiny little bit of information. I don't know why I'm doing this because this is like, it's actually quite small. Like, hey, you can trust this. It's very tiny. And you know, with this, I can prove the coins that you think are locked up on the other chain are locked up, and you can release the ones on your chain so the bridge is done.
Mm-hmm.
If I can do that using math, well, that's a hell of a lot more interesting to me than doing it with I guess, another chain or through another counterparty or otherwise. So where I can use mathematics and trustless, kind of a trustless mechanism, that to me is probably the most elegant. So that's one area I think is really interesting, and I think will be great to collaborate with a chain like Cardano, which is clearly cool. And so if we could do it, I would love it, because I think if you take the credibility of Algorand, credibility of Cardano, and we both confirm that, hey, we're going to use this particular, say, for example, a state proof as an example. It doesn't have to be. As the primitive that we used for cross-chain communication, we say, hey, every bridge out there, just use, all you got to do is open up your smart contract and accept this ZKP, this zero knowledge proof, and you have, straight away, you have a post-quantum, sorry, I should stop using so many buzzwords, a quantum resistant, because of course, the Falcon signatures that we use, which are a lattice-based post-quantum scheme, we are not absolutely certain about its post-quantum properties yet, of course, but NIST is pretty certain. You have a future secure-ish, we think, way to do cross-blockchain comms in a very elegant way, in a very efficient, low-fee way. Why wouldn't you take that? And if Cardano and Algorand do it together, I think the floodgates will open when they see the two big brainers, right? The big thinkers in the blockchain space.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get together, right? That's what it's about. So that's what I'm thinking there. Another area. Sorry, Coop. I keep putting you off. Another area. Too much to say. Is maybe smart contract or script audit. So I think I'm keen to eliminate danger for consumers using blockchain. When you get bitten, you don't go back. And I want to make it so that less and less folks lose their money or get hurt financially or otherwise. So I think if we standardize in a way, like if you look at Open Zeppelin and things like that, I think they've done a good job in terms of trying to like take the teeth out of some of the contract development. I think if we could standardize audit, it's such an expensive thing. There's so many. Every time we develop something sophisticated, the audit process is killer. It takes so long. It's so expensive. And it's prohibitively expensive for some small firms who have great ideas but don't have the money. If we could try to standardize that in a way that's just easier, I think it would foster innovation. So they're my two areas. Charles, if you're listening, reach out. I'm always there.
Well, that sounds fantastic. And I think that you're absolutely right in the sense that, with Silvio and Charles and that the academia that exists in both of those men, and just in the gravitas and the fact that they kind of lead the way with this, other chains will follow. And if they don't, we'll just talk to each other and send NFTs to each other or something. It'll be great. It'll be great. Exactly. They have some good looking stuff over there too.
By the way, at least we'll be doing it on the cheap, right? We're only paying $50 to transfer it, so that's great.
I know, right? It's very cheap. So okay, I mean that all sounds so good. I mean, I was going to ask you maybe like what you kind of see as some of the differences of Algorand and Cardano. I guess I'll ask that to you. Briefly is like what. Sorry,
here's a dangerous question. I'm going to ask it anyway.
Yeah, here's some potential for you to upset people. So what are the differences? What are some of the things that you see maybe are a strength over at Algorand, maybe, or a strength at Cardano, frankly.
Yeah, okay. I can do that.
Okay.
So well, there's some fundamental differences. For example, the UTXO model versus the account-based model.
Yeah, exactly.
And so like it lends itself differently in different ways. So there are some things that UTXO is really, really great at, and there's some things that account-based models are really, really great at. And I don't think it's that dissimilar to kind of like, you know, modern computing. It's like your iPhone is amazing, right? I mean, if you benchmark your iPhone and benchmark your desktop Intel Xeon chip in single core, they're going to be basically the same. I mean, but the thing is, one of them is in your pocket in the pub, or you know, when you're down, you know, in a restaurant and you're enjoying a glass of wine, you're able to browse, you know, websites, and it's super convenient, super great, and it's super snappy. But it's not gonna sustain a workload of like, you know, a render of some kind of like 3D model over the course of 24 hours. Similarly, right, you know, you've got your server computer at home, or your Intel Xeon, or your high-end chip. Again, it's power hungry, and but it's great for rendering out your Blender renders or your Toy Story render. But what it's not going to do is be a great experience for browsing the web. So I think, you know, similarly, I mean, that maybe wasn't the most elegant analogy, but you know, what I'm trying to say is UTXO is good for some things, account-based is good for others, or excel at others.
Right.
So I do think certain application models, when they're built on Cardano with UTXO, can make sense, and they can be, I think, highly concurrent in a way, because you can spend, of course, many UTXOs in a single transaction.
Right.
At the same time, if I look at something like Algorand, clearly, I mean, it's more compelling for me now because I'm here. But in being genuine and being completely transparent, as I mentioned earlier on, it's fit for global purpose. The settlement times, and we don't even have to go into where that will be at the end of the year, because we're inflating numbers that are already inflated compared to everyone else out there.
Right.
Whether it's 4,000, 10,000, 20,000, doesn't matter. It's already too much. Whether it's 4-second finality or 2-second finality, it's already fast enough. If I'm in the store and I'm tapping my Visa card, which I don't do because I use crypto all the time, and you should too, buy Algorand, is you know, it takes a couple of seconds to go through anyway, right? You tap it, you're waiting for the cashier to kind of give you the nod that, yeah, it went through, right? I mean, that's where Algorand is right now. And so yeah, I think where Algorand excels is that it's just so fast, so live, and so you know, ready to be the platform on which some of the most compelling Web3 apps are built, or I think over the next 5 years. That's why I'm here, and I've chosen Algorand.
That's right.
Cardano's so cool. Cardano's so cool.
Yeah. So see, there we go. I think that this is the energy we need, right? Like, look, I mean, Cardano's excellent too. So I mean, you know, so okay, and you touched on it. You know, as we kind of wrap up, there are, and I think you make a great point, right? 4-second finality, 2-second finality, 1,000 transactions per second, 10,000 transactions per second. At this point, how many transactions per second do we even actually need, right? I mean, that's the issue. So I think a lot of people want to see these things from I'm potentially marketing standpoint. They want to see, okay, well, we're the fastest, and it's like, but it's all happening, and it seems like it can happen when it's needed, right? So where are we in Algorand with some of these upgrades and you know, updates?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. Let me just say this, just interject one point, which is like transactions per second are not a very good measurement. And it's something I felt when I was working at Cardano, and it's also something I feel now working at Cardano. I mean, working at IOHK. Because you got to be real. Again, it's about authenticity, real in your numbers. I mean, I could launch a network that maybe has 100,000 transactions a second or 1 million transactions per second. But if my protocol requires 99% of those transactions per second to achieve consensus, then that's not very functional. It's not a very good metric by which to define something. So yeah, so I guess I'd like us to kind of steer away from transactions per second, because so many protocols out there are now quoting numbers that are like up the wazoo. They're like insane, you know.
Like Solana, right? Solana does that, don't they?
I'm not naming any names, Coop.
I was like, Solana, right? We can now. I'm being nice to Cardano. You don't have to be nice to Solana. I'm just kidding. All right.
Yeah. No, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
I'm teasing.
You try to get me, but you can't get me. I'm too fast.
Okay.
No, but like, yeah, you know, there are some, and so I want to be meaningful in what we say, and for me, it's like maybe value per second. Or that's not a very good, that doesn't sound very sensible, but there's some metric that we should get to where it construes, you know, some actual value. So yeah, transactions per second are funny. So
yeah, they're not.
So largely, yeah, where are we going? So again, I'm not on the protocol side anymore. So I guess what I'm trying to say there, I was very much in the weeds in the protocol for Cardano, and that was great. And now, you know, it's really, you know, Paul Regal and Gary Maloof and other leaders at the Inc. that are really setting the roadmap for the protocol, for Algorand at its core.
Right.
So really, my focus is on developer education and making the developer experience better. Maybe we can talk about that briefly in a moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, what I want to try and do is, I guess, really try to help and enable these guys as much as possible. Try to be a catalyst for the success of the protocol as much as possible, so that as they build this great stuff, I'm also there in the sidelines, like helping bring as many people as possible to the platform. In terms of like what are the exciting updates that are coming over the kind of next kind of half a year or so, we've got state proofs launching. I know I actually have a number in my head of weeks before we're launching them, but I don't want to say it because I'll probably upset someone.
Okay.
But can I say soon, very soon?
Yeah.
We have upgrades to the finality time, dropping from 4 seconds down to sub 4. We have an upgrade in transactions per second, a material upgrade, nearly 2x. And there's a whole slew of performance enhancements, new things in the AVM, the whole lot. Really cool stuff. And by the way, I'll be able to give a more coherent update on that as I learn more and have more time to spend with the Inc. guys.
Absolutely. So let's do, go ahead, finish what you were going to say.
Please, no, I was done. I was thinking.
Oh, okay, great. So let's pivot to what you said. Let's talk about how, you know, your focus on creating a more favorable environment for developers to come and build on Algorand. So, what does that look like? What are you doing there?
Yeah, so it's super interesting. I've only spent, you know, 3 weeks kind of really all day, every day looking at this. So it's not been that long in terms of understanding the context, but I would say that teal, right? It's cool, but teal, I'm not talking about PyTeal, I'm talking about teal here. It's like assembly. So I don't know if folks know, but just like super quick, kind of what is assembly? Assembly is like human readable instructions that correspond to processor actions. So whether it's an x86 processor or an ARM processor or a MIPS processor or some other processor, you will have instructions in that chip that do certain things. You know, add 2 numbers, divide, maybe not divide, but you know, move data around, and ultimately, the assembly is like a way to kind of say, push this number in here, pop it out there. You know, add these 2 things together, and so assembly can be thought of as kind of like the lowest level human readable code. After assembly, it goes down to like 1s and 0s, which we call machine code. But ultimately, these 1s and 0s can be sliced into chunks. And as they get pushed through the processor as like 5 volts, 0 volts, or maybe 3 volts, 0 volts, the processor interprets them as these instructions and does things. So I like to think of teal as assembly. It's like the instructions you can tell the AVM to do. And I like to think of the AVM, it's the Algorand virtual machine. There's an Ethereum virtual machine. There's a Java virtual machine, the JVM, that people write Java code on. I won't get into that tonight, or today, but ultimately the AVM is really like a little CPU, and it's able to execute certain code. So teal is like a representation of the things we can ask that CPU to do. Should we write things in teal? That's like asking, should we write things in x86 assembly? What is x86? x86 is the Intel instruction set for, if you have a computer bought in the last 20 years and it's Intel based, it'll be from Dell or otherwise, it'll be x86.
Right.
Now, did the guys and girls who wrote Chrome or wrote insert your favorite app here, Netflix or whatever else, did they write it in assembly? Did they get down into that low level thing? No, I don't think so. Maybe in some cases. And those cases, by the way, are where you're writing very highly performant code and you want to hand optimize it and you're a ninja at this kind of stuff.
Right, right.
So no, they didn't. They write it in languages like C and C++ and Rust and Swift and Objective-C and Python and JavaScript and all these great languages that allow us to express ourselves using more human style approaches. Like where we can say, this number plus this number equals, no, you wouldn't say that. You'd say A plus B equals X, return X. If this number equals true, or this value equals true rather, do Y. This is the way humans think, rather than in this assembly flow. So at the Inc., they've developed PyTeal. So PyTeal is taking a step up. So you're taking away from this assembly language, and you're now in a more kind of human understandable language. So where does that leave us? Well, I should say, by the way, the reason assembly languages exist, because one might ask, well, why do we have this bloody step in between the ones and zeros and then these instruction codes that I described? And the answer is, assembly languages are useful for developing compilers and certain debugging applications and other things. So they are a very useful step. But generally speaking, modern software is not written in these low-level languages. It's written in these high-level languages. So Ethereum has a high-level language. It does what I just suggested. And Ethereum, by the way, has an assembly type thing, and it has the EVM, and has all the things that Algorand has. And they call it Solidity. And it feels like JavaScript. So they have Web 2 devs. I say Web 2 as in guys and girls who are writing websites, writing modern internet apps, and they're used to using JavaScript. So we want them to come to Algorand. We want to make Algorand a metropolis, right? I want this to be like a buzzing city of activity, a hive of activity. I want not just about value locked, but NFTs. I want art. I want, as much media and value and interaction as possible on the chain. I want it to really feel alive. Yeah. And so to do that, we have to enable an easier path for folks to come, whether that's a newbie who doesn't know any software, someone who's come from Web 2 or traditional computer apps, or indeed an experienced Web 3 dev who just wants to try something different or wants to experience how fast and how cool Algorand is. We have to make that transition less friction. We can't have folks like that walk over coals to get onto Algorand. Right. So PyTeal is part of that step. And okay, so I think the next step. So there's going to be a multi-stage plan. The next step is productizing how PyTeal looks. So PyTeal is great, but the experience of developing in PyTeal may be a little bit incoherent. And what I mean by that is, well, where do I type my code? Well, you can type it in Notepad, you can type it in Vim or Emacs, or you can, if you use Vim, by the way, or you can type it in VS Code. A lot of people use VS Code. Well, I want to have top quality extensions for VS Code where folks can just type Algorand or PyTeal into the extension browser, hit install, and they've got everything they like. Syntax highlighting, debugging, the whole lot. So it's just a really easy experience. And then it's like, well, what else do we have? Well, how do you go from an idea to mainnet? So you've got an idea, you want to code it, you want to test it, you want to deploy it, you want to get it into mainnet. That needs to be kind of like single click. It needs to be as close to the kind of Apple style experience of releasing an iPhone app as possible. You need to be able to do it on your iPad. You need to be able to do it anytime. So I want to kind of package a set of tools that make sense for people, that are coherent, that work well together. And maybe there's like 5, 6, 7 things in that box. And together, they're going to be all the tools you need to build the sandcastle that is your app, right? I want to give them the bucket, the spade, the little kind of seashell thing to make the little things on top. I want to give them everything they need to make the greatest sandcastle the world has ever seen. And so that's what I want to do. That needs to be a coherent experience. And right now I feel like people have to come, they got to learn, you can look over there, bit of information over here. oh, here's one tool, great. You know, that needs to be more coherent. And that's what my focus is in the short term. In the longer term, I've got very exciting plans. I'm working with the Inc. They have even more exciting plans. And together we're going to come up with a master plan. It's going to be awesome.
That sounds awesome. I mean, that's, you know, that's what, when I go around and I talk to people from other chains or people that are technical, they're like, yeah, I mean, if I have a great reason to learn it, maybe I will. But like, otherwise, it's just like, well, I'm just going to do what I've been doing because, you know, they're just going to stay at Ethereum or they're going to go to, you know, Avalanche or something like that, where it's just very easy for them to continue to go, you know?
Sure. And I guess, right. Here's the reasons you should come over. Number one, we have an exponential growth of TVL. So there's more and more and more every single day people on Algorand because they've realized the truth, which is two, it's the fastest, fit for purpose, most awesomest blockchain in the space. And number three, say again.
I was gonna say I like it, John. I like it. I like it. Keep going. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. And number three, at the end of the day, it's about user experience. Like, it doesn't matter whether your app is iMessage, whether your app is Netflix on your smart TV, or whether your app is a decentralized exchange on a fledgling cryptocurrency network. What matters is user experience. So people are not going to come back. If it takes 10 minutes for my video to load on Netflix, I'm not going to come back. If it takes a week for my swap to go through, I'm not trading on that platform anymore. When you go to Algorand, you have the following things: speed, liveness, and low fees. And those three together, they're killer. And that is why I think it's going to be the most exciting place to build your dApp. I think the real smart people are realizing now, I got to get into Algorand before everyone else does. Because first mover advantage, that COOP, is probably the most important thing. Get in now before it's too late.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, and you know, Bitcoin is a good example of that first mover advantage, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to have to dry the tears of people in a year's time who haven't built an Algorand and have missed that opportunity. I don't want to have to do that. So get in now.
No, don't make John dry your tears. I mean, come on, you're getting me excited. And that's, I mean, I'm already excited, but it is exciting, right? I mean, we have this FIFA partnership coming up. You get these like huge, there's music and the potential for like the sporting experience, even at stadium. There's just so many, like there's cool things. And then there's those other things. And I see you want to chime in. And then there's those other things where Algorand is actually fit to be in the background and you not even know that you're using blockchain. And that's another important direction we're going, right? Yeah.
I totally agree. And like FIFA is an example. And by the way, I have no idea what they're doing. but
if you were going to guess, yeah.
But speaking abstractly, if your blockchain is selected by FIFA, it's selected for a reason. These people do their due diligence. But separate to that, you only want to engage with an organization of that magnitude and that scope if you're fit for purpose. Again, if your blockchain is able to deliver on the kind of applications that those folks want to build. And that's basically, again, why I think Algorand's great, right? It's just the same theme coming up and over again, which is it's ready to go. It's ready to build the types of things that we talk about building. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of kind of great partnerships in the space. Again, I think there's so much going on concurrently. I don't know what the landscape's going to look like in 2 years, but it's going to be, I think, pretty cool.
Cool. All right. Well, I know you have another meeting to get to. Oh man, I've got you way past. I am so sorry.
That's
okay. But so why don't we just finish with this? You promised. How did you get to cryptography? And then we'll finish it. All right. Okay.
Sure. So I guess I'm trying to think what the kind of most important thing was. I've always been fascinated by the intersection of mathematics and computer engineering. And so I was terrible at math in school. Like, I mean, actually I did okay until like when I was a very small child. But when I went to secondary school, I didn't do very well at all. Maybe I just didn't have a good rapport with teachers or whatever. Actually I've learned like advanced mathematics just on YouTube. But I think I was just stunned by the reality that I could, with two prime numbers that are randomly selected, I could take two prime numbers, then I'm talking about the RSA crypto system here, and I could multiply them together. And by doing so and selecting a public modulus and doing modular exponentiation, there's a lot to that. But by just fundamentally, the only secret in this system is two numbers. By taking two numbers, I could securely communicate with anyone in the world. I thought, wow, hang on. So you're telling me, Excel, the Microsoft product, can generate the seed for secure communications? I can use a dice and generate, numbers that I can use for secure communications globally. I mean, there's immense power in that. Mm-hmm. I look at the Germans in the World War and with Enigma and all of the engineering that went into that device and the level of I guess of upside it gave them in the conflict. Mm-hmm. And then you look at what was done by Turing in terms of solving Enigma and how the magnitude of the impact that happened and how it changed history and how mathematics, like these silly numbers that kids don't like in school sometimes, was the difference between this universe and that universe. And so, wow, that was a profound realization to me. I mean, maybe some people have this about other things, but I about art or music or other things. But I love that. And then once I got onto that line of thinking, I wanted to fundamentally understand these crypto systems and the trapdoor functions that belie them. And I'm happy to come on and talk about all this kind of stuff later. Mm-hmm. But learning elliptic curves, again, the elliptic curve crypto system, again, I just found it so fascinating. And that then brought me to, well, I see now how they use this in blockchain and then hashing functions and other things. And really, I'm relatively self-taught. Rather, I read a few books. I read Bruce Schneier's book, Applied Crypto, and I read Jean-Philippe Omasson's Modern or Serious Cryptography, it's called. And it's a very modern take on cryptography in it. And there's also Christoph Parr on YouTube. He does a course in cryptography, and it's immense. But anyway, my point is, I was never formally educated on it, but right. I have a fascination with it, and it's just been wonderful. It's been wonderful for my career. It's been also wonderful for my understanding of how modern communications works, and I just I love it.
Well, John, thank you so much. I'll let you get to your appointment, but I really appreciate this. I'm looking forward to our ability to collaborate on some of the more technical stuff in the future. And I just really appreciate your candor, and I had a lot of fun. Thank you for joining me.
Me too, Coop. Thanks.
All right. I'll talk to you soon.
Cheers.